Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Diego Lopes versus Jean Silva fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get and feel free to join the Patreon as well. I always have been talking about that a lot at the moment. The link will be in the description. You can request any kind of combat sporting related content and I will try my best to get it out there for you guys. There's been plenty of videos that have come as a result of that already, and I really appreciate all the support in which I've had with it so far. And again, the link will be in the description. Thank you very much. But yeah, let's get into this UFC fight. And of course, this is a card in which I don't feel like is going to get a tremendous amount of traction. I mean, it's UFC Noche, and of course, last year UFC Noche was a massive event with Marab versus O'Malley 1 as the headliner, and in the Sphere and everything that was kind of surrounded around that hype being around such a cool venue. And this is a bit different. I mean, I first of all don't believe it's in the Sphere, and then also at the same time, it's also not a main pay-per-view, and also the fact that around the same time is Canelo versus Crawford. So again, I feel like this kind of means that the card isn't going to get to that much attention, especially over Canelo Crawford, which is again, going to be live on Netflix, which is definitely a more accessible, overly watched platform than, of course, ESPN kind of is. So again, like I say, it's not really that surprising. It wouldn't be that surprising if this doesn't really sell that well. And again, it's not that surprising that they haven't decided to put a pay-per-view around at the same time as Canelo Crawford. I mean, I doubt that Dana White's going to be at this UFC Noche event, but as a fight, I do believe it is a really good fight. Something else that is a bit interesting with this being the headline. Of course, this is meant to be a celebration of kind of Mexico, and that's what the Noche events often are, that celebration of Mexico. Of course, the last one was headlined by two non-Mexican fighters, but this one is headlined by two Brazilians, and of course Diego Lopes and John Silva. So again, that's a little bit surprising because there always has been a bit of a rivalry with Brazil and Mexico. And again, with everything that happened with Diego Lopes and Yair Rodriguez when they were kind of going back and forth and talking about nationalities and stuff, there might be a little bit of bad blood from Mexican fans towards Diego Lopes for this fight. Again, we will have to wait and see. This is again the kind of real challenge to test how good the fighting nerds are. And after a poor weekend, a bad weekend last weekend with, of course, Mauricio Rufy and Caio Bajalio, both of them suffering losses in which were quite dominant defeats, really. I mean, Rufy got tapped out by Saint Denis just going to the ground and, not really doing a tremendous amount that was overly impressive, but it was just, work rate and Rufy just not really getting the space to be able to let off his creative strikes and things like that. And then Caio Bajalio was just outstruck and more clinically struck by the sniper that is Nassourdine Imavov. So like I say, it was a bit of a reality check for the fighting nerds who were on such a great run and were surrounded by a tremendous amount of momentum and hype just before the event. Of course, we had Carlos Prates going out there and having a great win, and there's been a couple of us that have been able to get good wins as well. But again, now they've come back down to reality a little bit and they've kind of been shown, Carlos Prates had his defeat as well against Ian Gary, I believe it was. So, they've all kind of been exposed to an extent at the top level. Jean Silva is now getting his opportunity to fight at the top level. And, I feel like he is got the capabilities to really lead the way, in my opinion, for the fighting nerds now. I mean, he's been shown that he is a bit different. I think he is got the best grappling from what I've seen out of all the fighting nerds, and is a submission threat unlike other members of the fighting nerds. When you look at Mauricio Rufy, when you look at Carlos Prates, they're excellent strikers, but they have to be given that kind of space to be allowed to strike and things like that, and then they can work off really well. But when it actually goes to the ground, then they can struggle a bit. And again, that has been showcased with both of them. Whereas, of course, Jean Silva last time out went and got a submission against Bryce Mitchell, who, of course, since moving it down a division, went on to get his own nice, grappling victory. So again, like I say, it was a very good win to have there, and again showcased a bit of something different from the Fighting Nerds. Again, referencing Caio Borralho, he went out against Imavov and just kind of struck with him, and wasn't able to get him down to the ground at any point. And so, like I say, that's something in which Jean won't do, and he'll be more willing to go to the ground, and perhaps that could be a good game plan and something in which would be recommended to do against such an explosive striker that is Diego Lopes. He is, I believe, tipped to be the most talented. I know that the Fighting Nerds have talked about him as being, like I say, one of the most talented fighters. And since coming into the UFC, he's had every fight end in stoppage. And, that is, of course, since the Contender Series, where he actually had quite a difficult matchup in the Contender Series, and that was his toughest fight. But then, since then, he's had nothing but stoppages, and he's been able to, dismantle every fight he's been in there with. Diego Lopes, however, is taking a risky fight here because losing this puts him right back down in the rankings. I mean, it is quite surprising to see that this matchup has been made because perhaps, fans might have preferred to watch him against Yair Rodriguez, like I say, referencing the press conference they had, I believe might have been it was before his fight with Volkanovski, I believe. And again, there was a good bit of back and forth between the two of them, and they were, like I say, kind of creating and stirring up a bit of a fight. And like I said, the fans were kind of wanting to see Yair Rodriguez versus Diego Lopes, and so, like I say, it's surprising to see that hasn't happened. Maybe Rodriguez is injured. I don't really know because maybe he's waiting for another title shot. Again, I'm not really too sure, but there is perhaps the possibility that we're about to have multiple contenders out of nowhere, realistically, in the featherweight division, all queuing up and waiting for the title opportunity because they have kind of all been rushed along a little bit all of a sudden without them actually fighting each other. I mean, if Silva beats Diego Lopes, then he's kind of jumped straight into a real good position in the rankings as well. Then we've got Lerone Murphy, who of course has gone on to beat Aaron Pico, and at the time of recording, there's no announcement that's been said for Lerone Murphy to get a title shot, but there was, it did seem like there was talks of him kind of jumping along the queue and jumping over Evloev, who of course had his chance to fight Aaron Pico on multiple occasions, and that fight kind of fell through. So, that would mean that there'll be Murphy, Evloev, Jean Silva, and possibly Yair Rodriguez as well, all kind of waiting around in the wings, not fighting each other, trying to get their own title opportunity without actually, like I say, testing against each other for a true number one contenders matchup, in which of course we've just had in the middleweight division. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Of course, rankings isn't everything, but I'm sure that Jean Silva, if he beats Diego Lopes, is going to probably be calling for a title shot. Diego Lopes is not going to, I think he's probably is going to want to keep it on his feet. I don't think he's going to want to go to the ground with him, even though, he couldn't handle the defensive movement and the boxing from Volk. He seemed to have, problems with Volk's movement. Like I say, Volk was continuously just circling the entirety of the fight. And again, Diego Lopes just couldn't seem to handle it. Whereas, he's probably is still going to want to go and stand toe to toe with somebody like Jean Silva. I think this fight is, definitely going to be an all action fire fight. It's going to be a fight in which I feel like is definitely going to entertain the fans. I think it is going to be a heavy striking contest. And I think something in which perhaps might make a bit of a, difference in this fight is what is a bit of a noticeable height difference, to be completely honest. I mean, Jean Silva isn't really that big for the weight. Obviously, I know that Volkanovski isn't really that big for the weight either, but I think Jean Silva is smaller than Volkanovski. I might be wrong. But then, Lopes is pretty big for the weight. He's kind of up there with the height of like a Brian Ortega. And there is going to be that significant height difference, and it did seem like maybe Diego Lopes seemed to struggle with the height of Volkanovski a little bit. So again, that could play a factor in this fight. To speak about both fighters individually, we'll start off with Diego Lopes and his kind of positives. He starts quickly. He's definitely going to be, straight to the action, and that's been showcased in all of his fights. I mean, he was able to drop Volkanovski in the second round, I believe, and he still went out straight away firing. And then he went on, before that against Brian Ortega to have an all-action firefight from the get-go as well. And that's kind of what we are getting used to from him. And that's definitely, I think, going to be something in which Silva's just going to have to, I think, weather. And again, I don't know if he's had to deal with that so far. Lopes has got a strong right uppercut, and again, if he's able to land that, that's definitely a very powerful shot to land, and he throws, a lot. He maintains a high level of aggression throughout the entirety of the fight. He's a front foot guy who wants to control the center and does carry his own power, which can always kind of keep him in the fight as well, carrying that good level of power. He's explosive. I think he's got heart. He took some quite big shots of his own against Volkanovski and was keeping on coming forwards, and no matter what, was trudging forwards. And I think this might sound a little bit silly, but with the long hair in which he has, he can look sweaty and he can look, like I say, like he's kind of gone for a real war, but maybe he's not taking an actual tremendous amount of punishment, but it just looks like it on his face and with his appearance because of the, the long greasy hair that he's trying to get out of his eyes, and it's just, all over the place and stuff like that, and he's trying to trudge him through that. He pretty much throws nothing but combinations, and he does carry, a decent level of speed as well. And again, like I say, the speed of hand is good. And if he can time with his overhand as well, that's another shot in which you'll be able to land well. It's just, like I say, getting that timing well and down. If Jean Silva puts himself in a bad position on the ground, then Lopes will be coming with good ground and pound. He's not going to be one of the fighters that just invites you back to your feet. He is going to deliver with good ground and pound if he gets that opportunity. He, when he does start to use his head kicks and his low kicks, they are good. He just didn't really use them that well against Volkanovski, and I feel like he really could have tried to slow Volkanovski down a bit more with the kicks, but he just wasn't able to pin him down to feel comfortable enough to be able to throw them. Instead, he was just throwing a lot of wheel kicks in which looked poor, didn't land, and just was a waste of energy. But if, like I say, he got to his head kicks and got to his low kicks, he could really have a bit of success. I think he has got a good chin as well, Lopes. I don't know if Silva's chin's really been tested a tremendous amount so far, but Lopes, like I say, I think did take some good shots against Volkanovski, who obviously isn't the most powerful of guys in the division, but, that could definitely have worn over time. Negatives about Lopes, I mean, he's got pretty much no defensive movement. His head's on the line often. He's quite a big target to land on. He comes in quite recklessly, and he can come in quite wild and wide at the same time. If he doesn't win the exchanges, he can be hurt badly. Like I say, he puts a lot into his exchanges, and if he gets caught or if he gets the bad end of it, then it does seem like it hurts. He doesn't fight off his back that well, or fight off, if he's got his back up against the cage, he won't really be throwing a tremendous amount or really doing that much to get himself out of that bad position. He doesn't really, like I say, follow up with his kicks enough, except from them, of course, bad wheel kicks, in which we saw a couple of. His balance and his footwork isn't the best, and that did seem to again affect when he got taken, when he got hit with a shot. It seemed to look like it did more damage against Volkanovski because his footwork was just putting him in bad positions to get caught off balance and then pushed back. His accuracy in combinations isn't amazing. He can be walked onto shots. I think he can be made to follow a bit as well. Again, he wasn't cutting off the cage well against Volkanovski. He can be wide with hooks, like I've said. He takes a lot of punishment as well. Silva, as a fighter, he's confident, he's relaxed. I mean, he's going to be probably trying to talk to Lopes and things like that. It will be interesting to see how Lopes handles somebody like Silva, who is going to be, like I say, trying to talk, trying to get under your skin and things like that. I don't think Bryce Mitchell handled it that well, but again, how will Diego Lopes handle it? He's a creative striker, Silva, with a very good, striking variety and options in his arsenal. I think he works off his back well as well. If he gets himself in his own bad positions, he can still work off well and have success. Mitchell went for a takedown at one point and put Silva on his back, but then Silva ended up, getting him in his own, attempt for a submission. Of course, it didn't come through, but again, it was still working off his back in a bad position to an extent, and was able to have the more so success and kind of force Bryce Mitchell to try and then go back to his feet because he didn't want to be in that position, even though it was still a good dominating position to be in. He's a strong striker. I think he twists into his body kicks nicely, and he can keep you up against the cage quite well. He's got good striking variety. I think at the same time, speaking about him being able to keep you up against the cage, he can get himself back to the cage well if he gets himself in a negative position. He steps into his shots well. I think he's got good takedown defense at the same time. He's got good hand speed himself, and he knows when to commit to his own submissions. I think he is a submission threat. He's not just a striker. He fights well in the pocket, and again, he will probably be having to do that at quite a few points against Diego Lopes. And how well can he fight in the pocket and generate power, we will be able to see in this fight. He puts good combinations together, and he is physically strong. Negatives about him, I think you could probably say that he is overconfident, and again, that could lead to possible problems if he is overconfident, and you could probably make that argument about quite a few of the fighting nerds, maybe being a bit too overconfident at times. His chin is in the air, and he doesn't really have a tremendous amount of, a defensive guard, and it means if he gets caught with a nice uppercut from Diego Lopes, then he could, really take the full force of that shot, and that will definitely test his chin. He lets you get your work off, I think, early. He's not a tremendously quick starter himself, and again, how will he be able to counteract Diego Lopes early on? He takes the give shots as well. He's not the best against tight, kind of compact strikers that don't respect his power. If you can stand toe to toe and you can, still catch shots to then go and throw your own counters, then again, he might struggle a little bit, and he can kind of run away when he's on the back foot a bit. If he can't get his timing or rhythm down, he can struggle. He can be wasteful with his takedown attempts at times, and he can put himself in bad positions from, big creative striking attempts in which he tries to throw. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Jean Silva is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. I think it's going to be a fire fight. I think Lopes is going to start very strong, probably take the first round, and then Jean Silva might catch him with a shot, or might be able to assert his strength into the second round. I think the third round, the fourth round, maybe he could go and try and get a takedown of some kind, and like I say, wear Diego Lopes down a bit. Again, maybe showcase a bit of movement. We'll have to wait and see how good he is actually fighting on the back foot. Again, if he can take the shots of Lopes, I think Jean Silva is the more accurate guy with the better striking variety, and all round, like I say, a better fighter in that aspect. And, like I say, maybe could even try and throw up a submission attempt. And, Jean Silva, I don't think he's tremendously used to fighting the bigger opponents, so that will definitely play a factor. But I think he's going to be able to handle it enough to be able to get that unanimous decision. But he is going to have to work for it. And for a first 5-rounder, it is going to be a tough test for sure. But again, like I said, I do think that Jean Silva is the most talented fighting nerd. And again, I think he is going to be able to showcase that for this fight. Then who he goes on to fight next, I will probably be guessing, it might even be announced by the time that the fight is, there, that Volkanovski will be fighting Murphy soon. So Evloev, Yair Rodriguez, or Aljamain Sterling, probably the three options in which Jean Silva will have of who he can face next. Rodriguez will probably be the most exciting fight, and I feel like, fans would probably want to see that, because I doubt fans want to see Rodriguez against Volk again. Evloev, I don't know if he'd want to take a number one contenders match, but Volk did say that, Evloev is kind of being pushed aside a bit because he's not been, he's been not taking the fight against Aaron Pico for, injuries or for whatever reasons, so he might have to work in a number one contenders position again. Or, Aljamain Sterling, of course, he said that he wants to get back to a title shot. The best way for him to do that would be to go on to face someone like a Jean Silva and, really stop a hype train, and that would then get himself back in the position to get a title shot. So, again, all three possible matchups there. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like video if you did, like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.